Sarah Mitchell had dreamed of flying since she was 7 years old. Growing up on a small farm in Kansas, she would lie on her back in the wheat fields, watching military jets streak across the endless blue sky above. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, would tell her stories about the brave pilots who saved his unit countless times. Those stories planted a seed in Sarah's heart that would grow into an unshakable determination. When Sarah turned 18, she walked into the Army recruitment office in her hometown. The sergeant behind the desk looked her up and down with skepticism. At 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing barely 120 pounds, Sarah didn't fit the typical image of a combat pilot. But her test scores were exceptional, and her determination was undeniable. She signed up that very day, knowing she faced an uphill battle in a field dominated by men. Basic training was brutal. Sarah was one of only 12 women in a company of 200 soldiers. The other recruits didn't take her seriously at first, making jokes about her size and questioning whether she could handle the physical demands. But Sarah had grown up working on a farm, hauling hay bales and fixing machinery alongside her brothers. She was stronger than she looked, and more importantly, she was tougher than anyone expected. During the first week of training, Sarah's drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Martinez, singled her out during a particularly grueling obstacle course. "Mitchell," he shouted, "you think you can keep up with the big boys?" Sarah didn't respond with words. Instead, she attacked the obstacle course with fierce determination, scaling walls twice her height and crawling under barbed wire without complaint. When she finished, her hands were bloody and her uniform was torn, but she had completed the course faster than half the men in her unit. Word of Sarah's performance began to spread. Other drill sergeants came to watch her training sessions. She excelled at marksmanship, hitting targets that seasoned soldiers missed. Her tactical thinking impressed her instructors, and her ability to remain calm under pressure set her apart from many of her peers. But it was during a helicopter orientation flight that Sarah truly found her calling. The moment the helicopter lifted off the ground, Sarah felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. The complex dance of controls, the need for split-second decisions, and the three-dimensional thinking required for helicopter flight came naturally to her. The instructor pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Johnson, noticed her intuitive understanding immediately. "You've got good hands, Mitchell," he told her after the flight. "Have you ever considered flight school?" That conversation changed everything. Sarah threw herself into preparing for flight school admission with single-minded focus. She studied aerodynamics textbooks until late into the night, memorizing every principle of flight. She worked out twice a day to meet the physical requirements, pushing her body beyond its limits. Most importantly, she sought out every opportunity to fly, volunteering for any mission that would get her airtime. The other soldiers in her unit began to notice Sarah's dedication. Some were supportive, recognizing her genuine passion and skill. Others remained skeptical, convinced that the military was lowering standards to accommodate women. Sarah heard the whispered comments and felt the weight of their expectations. She knew she wasn't just representing herself. She was representing every woman who had ever dreamed of flying military aircraft. When the acceptance letter for flight school finally arrived, Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. She had been accepted, but the real challenge was just beginning. Flight school would test every aspect of her ability, both in the cockpit and on the ground. The academic workload was intense, covering everything from advanced aerodynamics to weapon systems. The flying requirements were even more demanding, requiring precision and skill that took years to develop. Sarah's first day at flight school was intimidating. She was one of only 3 women in a class of 45 students. The other students came from diverse backgrounds. Some were seasoned enlisted soldiers, others were fresh college graduates. What they all shared was an intense competitiveness and an unwavering belief in their abilities. Sarah knew she would have to prove herself all over again. The instructors at flight school were some of the best pilots in the Army. They had flown combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they demanded excellence from their students. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, Sarah's primary flight instructor, had a reputation for being particularly tough. He had washed out more students than any other instructor, earning him the nickname the Dream Crusher. During her first flight with Thompson, Sarah was nervous but focused. She had practiced the pre-flight procedures hundreds of times in simulation, and she executed them flawlessly. When they lifted off, Thompson immediately began testing her limits, calling out emergency procedures and demanding instant responses. Sarah responded calmly and correctly to each challenge, her farm girl upbringing serving her well under pressure. "Not bad, Mitchell," Thompson said after they landed. It was the closest thing to praise she would hear from him for months. But Sarah detected a hint of respect in his voice, and that was enough to fuel her determination for the challenges ahead. As the weeks passed, Sarah's classmates began to notice her exceptional abilities. She could hover a helicopter with mathematical precision, execute complex maneuvers with ease, and maintain situational awareness even in the most chaotic scenarios. Her instructors began to take notice too, though they were careful not to show favoritism. In the ultra-competitive environment of flight school, any perceived special treatment could undermine Sarah's credibility with her peers. The real test came during night flying exercises. Flying helicopters at night requires a completely different set of skills, relying heavily on instruments and spatial awareness. Many excellent day pilots struggle with night operations, and it's where a significant percentage of flight school washouts occur. Sarah approached night flying with the same methodical preparation she brought to everything else, studying the procedures until she could recite them in her sleep. Her first night flight was a revelation. Where other students struggled with disorientation and spatial awareness, Sarah seemed to thrive in the challenging environment. Her instructor, amazed by her natural ability, began giving her increasingly complex missions. Soon she was performing night operations that were typically reserved for advanced students. As flight school progressed, Sarah's reputation grew. She wasn't just keeping up with her male counterparts. She was often outperforming them. But with success came increased scrutiny and pressure. She knew that one mistake could undo months of progress, and that her failures would be magnified while her successes might be minimized. Sarah graduated flight school in the top 10% of her class, earning her wings and the right to call herself an Army aviator. The graduation ceremony was a moment of pure joy for her family, who had traveled from Kansas to watch their daughter achieve her dream. Her father, tears in his eyes, pinned her wings on her uniform with hands that shook with pride. "I always knew you'd make it, sweetheart," he whispered. But earning her wings was just the beginning of Sarah's journey. Now came the critical decision about what type of aircraft she would fly. The Army operated several different helicopters, each with its own mission and requirements. There were utility helicopters for transport and reconnaissance, medical evacuation helicopters for rescue missions, and attack helicopters for combat operations. Sarah knew exactly which one she wanted to fly. The AH-64 Apache was the most feared attack helicopter in the world. With its advanced weapon systems, sophisticated sensors, and ability to operate in the most dangerous combat environments, the Apache represented the pinnacle of military aviation. It was also the most exclusive aircraft in the Army's fleet, with only the very best pilots selected for Apache training. And traditionally, those pilots had always been men. When Sarah submitted her request for Apache training, the response was swift and disappointing. "Request denied," read the official memo from the aviation branch. The explanation was bureaucratic and impersonal. "Current policy does not permit female pilots in direct combat roles." Sarah stared at the letter in disbelief. She had proven herself capable of flying any helicopter in the Army's inventory, but military policy was preventing her from pursuing her ultimate goal. The denial hit Sarah harder than any physical challenge she had faced. She had endured years of skepticism and discrimination, always believing that her performance would eventually speak for itself. Now she was learning that sometimes performance wasn't enough to overcome institutional barriers. For the first time since joining the Army, Sarah considered giving up her dream of flying attack helicopters. Instead of accepting defeat, Sarah threw herself into her assigned role flying UH-60 Blackhawks. If she couldn't fly Apaches, she would become the best Blackhawk pilot in the Army. She volunteered for every challenging mission, from medical evacuations in mountainous terrain to special operations insertions behind enemy lines. Her reputation for skill and reliability grew with each successful mission. During one particularly dangerous rescue mission in Afghanistan, Sarah's abilities were put to the ultimate test. A special forces team had been pinned down by enemy fire in a remote valley, with several wounded soldiers requiring immediate evacuation. The terrain was treacherous, with high mountains and unpredictable weather conditions. 2 previous rescue attempts had failed due to enemy fire and difficult flying conditions. Sarah studied the mission briefing carefully, analyzing every aspect of the operation. The landing zone was tiny, barely large enough for a helicopter and surrounded by enemy positions. The approach would require flying through a narrow canyon while taking fire from multiple directions. It was exactly the type of mission that separated exceptional pilots from merely good ones. As Sarah lifted off for the rescue mission, her crew chief, Sergeant Rodriguez, looked nervous. He had flown with many pilots over his 10-year career, but this mission pushed the limits of what was considered possible. "You sure about this, ma'am?" he asked over the intercom. Sarah's response was calm and confident. "We're bringing those soldiers home, Rodriguez. That's what we do." The flight to the target area took 40 minutes, with Sarah navigating through mountain passes and staying low to avoid enemy radar. As they approached the valley where the Special Forces team was trapped, radio chatter from ground controllers painted a grim picture. The enemy had reinforced their positions and the wounded soldiers were in critical condition. Sarah's approach to the landing zone was a masterpiece of flying skill. She descended into the canyon at maximum speed, using the terrain to mask her approach from enemy gunners. At the last possible moment, she pulled the Black Hawk into a steep flare, bleeding off airspeed and settling into the tiny landing zone with inches to spare on either side of the rotor. Blades, enemy fire erupted from all directions as the Special Forces team rushed toward the helicopter with their wounded comrades. Bullets pinged off the aircraft's armor as Sarah held the helicopter steady, her hands rock solid on the controls despite the chaos around them. Her door gunners returned fire, suppressing the enemy positions long enough for the soldiers to load aboard. The takeoff was even more challenging than the landing. With the helicopter loaded beyond its normal capacity, Sarah had to coax every bit of performance from the aircraft. She used the canyon walls to shield the helicopter from enemy fire, flying an intricate path that required split-second timing and absolute precision. One mistake would have meant death for everyone aboard. As they cleared the valley and headed for the medical facility, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The mission had been successful, with all the wounded soldiers stabilized and en route to proper medical care. But more importantly, she had proven once again that she could handle any challenge the Army could throw at her. Word of Sarah's heroic rescue mission spread quickly through the aviation community. The Special Forces soldiers she had rescued made sure everyone knew about the female pilot who had saved their lives. Her commanding officer recommended her for the Distinguished Flying Cross, one of the highest awards for aerial achievement. The citation read, "Captain Mitchell's exceptional flying skill and courage under fire saved the lives of 6 American soldiers." Despite her growing reputation and impressive record, Sarah's request for Apache training continued to be denied. The official reasons varied. Sometimes it was policy, sometimes it was about unit cohesion, sometimes it was about physical requirements. But Sarah knew the real reason. The military establishment wasn't ready to accept women in direct combat roles, regardless of their abilities. The frustration began to take its toll on Sarah. She loved flying and serving her country, but she felt trapped in a system that refused to recognize her full potential. Some of her fellow pilots sympathized with her situation, while others believed the restrictions were justified. The debate about women in combat was intensifying throughout the military, with passionate advocates on both sides. Sarah's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Brigadier General Patricia Hayes, one of the highest-ranking women in the Army, had been following Sarah's career with interest. General Hayes had faced similar barriers during her own rise through the ranks, and she recognized the exceptional talent that was being wasted due to outdated policies. During a visit to Sarah's base, General Hayes made a point of meeting with the young pilot. "I've been reading your file, Captain Mitchell," she said during their private conversation. "Your record is remarkable. Have you ever considered that you might be exactly what the Apache program needs?" Sarah was confused by the general's cryptic comment, but she sensed that something significant was about to change. "General, Hayes had been working behind the scenes to create opportunities for exceptional female pilots like Sarah. She knew that policy changes would come eventually, but she also knew that having proven performers ready when those changes occurred would be crucial. She began making phone calls to influential colleagues, building support for a pilot program that would allow select female aviators to train on attack helicopters. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. Sarah's Commanding officer summoned her to his office with an expression she couldn't read. "Congratulations, Captain," he said, handing her a set of orders. "You've been selected for a special assignment." Sarah's heart raced as she read the document. She was being transferred to Fort Rucker for Apache transition training, as part of an experimental program evaluating female pilots in attack aviation roles. Fort Rucker, Alabama, was known as the home of Army aviation, and it was where Sarah would face the most challenging phase of her military career. The Apache transition course was notoriously difficult, with a failure rate that exceeded 30% even among experienced pilots. Sarah would be the only woman in her class, and she knew that every eye would be watching her performance. The AH-64 Apache was unlike any aircraft Sarah had ever encountered. Where the Black Hawk was straightforward and forgiving, the Apache was complex and demanding. It featured 2 separate cockpits, advanced weapon systems, sophisticated targeting equipment, and flight characteristics that required months to master. The helicopter was designed for one purpose: to find and destroy enemy targets in the most hostile environments imaginable. Chief Warrant Officer Michael Stevens would be Sarah's primary instructor pilot. Stevens was a legend in the Apache community, with over 3,000 hours of combat flying time and a reputation for producing exceptional pilots. He was also known for his intense teaching style and his belief that only the very best should be allowed to fly the Army's premier attack helicopter. Their first meeting was brief and professional. Stevens looked Sarah up and down, his expression unreadable. "I've read your file, Captain Mitchell," he said. "Impressive record. But flying Blackhawks and flying Apaches are 2 completely different things. Are you ready to start over as a student pilot?" Sarah nodded, understanding that her previous achievements meant nothing in this new world. The ground school phase of Apache training was intellectually demanding. Sarah spent 12 hours a day studying aircraft systems, weapons employment, and tactical procedures. The Apache systems were incredibly complex, with multiple computers, sensors, and weapons that all had to work together seamlessly. Every switch, button, and display had to be memorized, along with the procedures for hundreds of different emergency situations. Sarah's classmates were all experienced pilots, most with combat experience in Iraq or Afghanistan. They had heard about the female pilot who was joining their course, and reactions were mixed. Some were curious and supportive, while others were skeptical about the military's decision to include women in attack aviation. Sarah kept her head down and focused on her studies, determined to let her performance speak for itself. The first time Sarah climbed into an Apache cockpit, she was overwhelmed by the complexity. The front seat, where she would eventually sit as the co-pilot and gunner, was surrounded by displays, switches, and controls. The targeting system alone required weeks to master, with its ability to track multiple targets simultaneously while the pilot maneuvered the aircraft. The back seat, where the pilot sat, was equally complex, with flight controls that were far more sensitive than anything Sarah had experienced. Stevens was a demanding instructor from the very beginning. During their first flight, he deliberately created emergency situations to test Sarah's responses. "Engine fire," he would shout, expecting instant recognition and correct procedures. "Hydraulic failure. Tail rotor malfunction. Target acquired." The rapid-fire sequence of emergencies was designed to overwhelm new students, separating those who could handle the Apache's demands from those who couldn't. Sarah struggled initially, as all Apache students did. The helicopter's flight characteristics were unlike anything she had experienced. It was incredibly sensitive to control inputs, requiring a delicate touch that took time to develop. The weapon systems were equally demanding, requiring her to think like both a pilot and a gunner simultaneously. During her first few flights, Sarah felt like she was trying to solve a complex puzzle while riding a mechanical bull. Stevens was relentless in his criticism during those early flights. "Too much collective. Watch your airspeed. You're behind the aircraft." His constant corrections were part of the Apache training methodology, designed to push students to their limits and identify any weaknesses before they became dangerous. Sarah took every criticism to heart, spending hours in the simulator trying to perfect her techniques. The breakthrough came during her 3rd week of training. Sarah was practicing weapons employment when something clicked. Suddenly, the complex dance of flying the Apache while operating its weapon systems began to make sense. Her control inputs became smoother, her targeting more precise, and her situational awareness improved dramatically. Stevens noticed the change immediately. "Better," he said after a particularly challenging training flight. It was the first positive feedback Sarah had received from him, and it meant everything. From that point forward, her progress accelerated rapidly. She began to understand why the Apache was considered the ultimate attack helicopter, and why only the best pilots were selected to fly it. The other students in her class began to take notice of Sarah's improvement. During academic sessions, she consistently scored among the highest on tests and evaluations. In the simulator, she handled complex scenarios with increasing confidence and skill. But it was during live-fire exercises that Sarah truly began to shine. The Apache's weapon systems were incredibly sophisticated, capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously at ranges that exceeded visual contact. Sarah demonstrated an intuitive understanding of the targeting systems, able to acquire and engage targets with remarkable speed and accuracy. Her gunnery scores were among the best in the class, impressing even the most skeptical instructors. As the course progressed, Sarah faced increasingly challenging scenarios. Night operations, adverse weather flying, and complex tactical situations all tested different aspects of her abilities. The instructors deliberately created high-stress situations to see how students would respond under pressure. Sarah's farm upbringing and years of military training served her well, allowing her to remain calm and focused when others became overwhelmed. The most challenging phase of training involved formation flying and coordinated attacks. Apache helicopters rarely operated alone, instead working in pairs or larger formations to maximize their effectiveness. Flying in formation required exceptional skill, as pilots had to maintain precise positions while navigating terrain and avoiding enemy threats. The coordination required for multi-aircraft attacks was even more demanding, requiring pilots to communicate and coordinate their actions seamlessly. Sarah's experience as a Black Hawk pilot proved invaluable during formation training. She understood the importance of communication and coordination, and her ability to think tactically gave her an advantage over some of her classmates. Stevens began assigning her increasingly complex formation roles, testing her ability to lead as well as follow. The other students began to seek out Sarah's help with particularly challenging concepts. Despite being the outsider in many ways, her knowledge and analytical approach to problems made her a valuable study partner. She formed strong friendships with several classmates, earning their respect through her performance rather than seeking acceptance through politics or personality. As graduation approached, the pressure intensified. The final examinations would determine who would earn their Apache wings and who would be sent back to their previous aircraft. Sarah knew she was performing well, but she also knew that success in training didn't guarantee acceptance in the Apache community. She would still face skepticism and resistance from some quarters regardless of her abilities. The night before the final check ride, Sarah couldn't sleep. She reviewed procedures and emergency checklists, running through scenarios in her mind. She thought about her father and the stories he had told her about military aviators. She thought about the soldiers she had rescued in Afghanistan and the responsibility she felt to serve her country to the best of her abilities. Stevens found her in the simulator building at 0500, running through practice scenarios. "Nervous, Mitchell?" he asked. Sarah looked up from the controls, her expression determined. "No, sir. Just making sure I'm ready." Stevens smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him during the entire course. "You're ready," he said simply. "You've been ready for weeks." The final check ride was conducted by Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, the commander of the Apache training unit. He was known for his exacting standards and his ability to find weaknesses in even the best students. Sarah approached the evaluation with confidence, knowing that she had prepared as thoroughly as possible for this moment. The flight lasted 2 hours and covered every aspect of Apache operations. Sarah demonstrated her ability to employ all the helicopter's weapon systems, conduct formation flying, and handle multiple emergency situations simultaneously. Her performance was flawless, earning praise from Lieutenant Colonel Martinez that he rarely gave to students. "Outstanding performance, Captain Mitchell," he said after the flight. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished here." Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief, but she also knew that earning her Apache wings was just the beginning of an even greater challenge. Sarah's assignment to the 1st Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment at Fort Hood, Texas, marked the beginning of a new chapter in her career. The unit was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan, and Sarah would be joining them as the first female Apache pilot in the battalion's history. The news of her assignment had spread throughout the unit before she arrived, creating a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation among the soldiers. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, was a combat veteran with 3 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He had initially opposed the assignment of a female pilot to his unit, believing it would create unnecessary complications and distractions. However, Sarah's training records were so impressive that he decided to give her a fair chance to prove herself. Sarah's first day at Fort Hood was memorable for all the wrong reasons. As she walked into the battalion headquarters, conversations stopped and heads turned. She could feel the weight of everyone's attention and knew that her every action would be scrutinized. The operations officer, Major Thompson, gave her a brief tour of the facilities, his manner professional but distant. The other pilots in the unit were a tight-knit group, bonded by years of training and combat experience together. Sarah understood that earning their acceptance would take time and would depend entirely on her performance. She introduced herself to each pilot individually, answering their questions about her background and training with patience and professionalism. Captain Derek Walsh was the most vocal skeptic in the unit. A veteran of 2 combat deployments, he believed that women didn't belong in combat aviation and wasn't shy about expressing his opinions. "This is just political correctness gone too far," he told his fellow pilots. "She's going to get someone killed when we deploy." Walsh's attitude influenced several other pilots, creating an undercurrent of resistance that Sarah could feel but couldn't directly address. Sarah's approach to winning over her new unit was simple. She would outwork everyone and prove her worth through performance. She arrived early every morning to study aircraft technical manuals and tactical procedures. She volunteered for additional training flights and spent extra time in the simulator, perfecting her skills. Most importantly, she sought out opportunities to fly with different pilots, demonstrating her abilities one flight at a time. Her first flight with Chief Warrant Officer Rodriguez was a routine training mission, but Sarah treated it like a check ride. Rodriguez was known for his exceptional flying skills and his direct communication style. He had served with women pilots before and approached Sarah's assignment with an open mind, interested in seeing what she could do. During the flight, Rodriguez put Sarah through a series of increasingly challenging maneuvers. He called out tactical scenarios, testing her ability to employ the Apache's weapon systems while maintaining situational awareness. Sarah's responses were crisp and accurate, demonstrating the high level of training she had received at Fort Rucker. "Not bad, Mitchell," Rodriguez said after they landed. "You know your stuff." Word of Rodriguez's positive assessment began to spread through the unit, creating the first crack in the wall of skepticism that Sarah faced. Other pilots began to view her with less suspicion and more curiosity about her actual abilities. The unit's deployment to Afghanistan was scheduled for 3 months away, giving Sarah limited time to integrate into the team. The training schedule was intense, with daily flights designed to prepare the pilots for the challenges they would face in combat. Sarah threw herself into every aspect of the training, from weapons employment to tactical formations to emergency procedures. During one particularly challenging training exercise, Sarah's abilities were put to the test in front of the entire unit. The scenario involved a complex rescue mission in mountainous terrain, with multiple aircraft working together to extract a downed pilot. Sarah was assigned as the wingman to Captain Walsh, the same pilot who had been most vocal about his opposition to her assignment. As the mission began, Walsh deliberately made the exercise more difficult for Sarah by calling rapid changes to the flight plan and creating scenarios not covered in the briefing. He was testing her ability to adapt under pressure and hoping to expose any weaknesses in her training. Instead, Sarah responded to each challenge with skill and composure, adjusting her tactics seamlessly and maintaining perfect formation with Walsh's aircraft. The climax of the exercise came when the ground controllers called for immediate, close air support to protect the rescue team. Walsh engaged targets on the left side of the landing zone, while Sarah was assigned targets on the right. The coordination required was extremely precise, as any mistake could result in friendly fire casualties in the training scenario. Sarah's weapons employment was flawless, She identified and engaged all assigned targets within seconds, her accuracy impressing even the skeptical ground controllers. When Walsh's aircraft experienced a simulated malfunction, Sarah smoothly assumed the lead role, directing the rescue operation and ensuring the successful completion of the mission. After the debriefing, Walsh approached Sarah privately. His expression was serious, but his tone had changed from the hostility she had experienced before. "I owe you an apology, Mitchell," he said. "I was wrong about you. That was some of the best flying I've seen from any pilot, male or female." The conversation marked a turning point in Sarah's acceptance within the unit. As word of Sarah's exceptional performance spread, other pilots began seeking her out as a preferred flying partner. Her technical knowledge, tactical thinking, and flying skills had earned their respect. More importantly, her professional demeanor and willingness to help others had begun to win their friendship. The preparation for deployment intensified as the departure date approached. Sarah participated in live fire exercises, survival training, and cultural orientation briefings about Afghanistan. She studied intelligence reports about enemy tactics and learned about the specific challenges of operating in the high-altitude, mountainous environment where they would be stationed. During one of the final training exercises before deployment, Sarah's aircraft experienced a real emergency. While conducting a low-level training flight, her Apache suffered a complete electrical failure, leaving her with limited instruments and no radio communication. The situation was dangerous, requiring immediate action to prevent a potential crash. Sarah's response to the emergency was textbook perfect. She immediately executed the appropriate emergency procedures, maintaining control of the aircraft while troubleshooting the electrical problem. Her instructor pilot in the front seat later said that her calm professionalism during the emergency was remarkable, especially considering the high-stress nature of the situation. Sarah managed to safely land the disabled aircraft at the nearest airfield, where maintenance crews worked to repair the electrical system. The emergency had lasted only 12 minutes, but it had provided another demonstration of Sarah's skills under pressure. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson, who had been monitoring the training exercise, was impressed by her handling of the situation. "Outstanding job, Mitchell," Patterson told her after the flight. "That's exactly the kind of pilot I want flying with my unit in combat." His public praise carried significant weight within the battalion, further cementing Sarah's acceptance among her peers. As the deployment date approached, Sarah felt confident in her abilities but remained aware of the challenges ahead. Combat operations would test every aspect of her training and character. She would be operating in an environment where mistakes could have deadly consequences, not just for herself but for the soldiers depending on her support. The farewell ceremony at Fort Hood was emotional for all the families saying goodbye to their loved ones. Sarah's parents had flown in from Kansas to see her off, their pride evident despite their concern for her safety. Her father, now graying and walking with a slight limp from his Vietnam injuries, pulled her aside for a private conversation. "You've already made me prouder than I ever thought possible," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "But remember, it's not about proving anything to anyone else anymore. Just come home safe." Sarah hugged him tightly, understanding the weight of his words and the sacrifice that military families made every day. The final briefing before departure was conducted by a general from the Pentagon, who had flown in specifically to address the unit. He spoke about their mission in Afghanistan and the important role they would play in supporting ground forces. When he finished his prepared remarks, he asked to speak with Sarah privately. "Captain Mitchell," the general said, "I want you to know that a lot of people are watching your performance on this deployment. You're carrying more than just your own reputation. You're helping to shape the future of women in combat aviation. I have complete confidence in your abilities, but I wanted you to understand the significance of what you're doing." Sarah understood the pressure, but she also felt ready for the challenge. She had trained extensively, earned the respect of her peers, and proven her abilities in every situation she had faced. As she boarded the transport aircraft that would take her unit to Afghanistan, Sarah thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment and the even greater challenges that lay ahead. Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of combat operations. Surrounded by mountains and located in one of the most dangerous regions of the country, the base served as home to Sarah's battalion for what would be a challenging 9-month deployment. The Apache helicopters were housed in reinforced hangars, designed to protect them from enemy rocket attacks that occurred with disturbing regularity. Sarah's first weeks in Afghanistan were spent adapting to the unique challenges of combat operations in a high-altitude, mountainous environment. The thin air affected helicopter performance significantly, reducing lift capability and requiring constant adjustments to flying techniques. The weather was unpredictable, with sudden sandstorms and violent thunderstorms that could ground aircraft for days at a time. The enemy they faced was unlike anything Sarah had trained for. Taliban fighters were skilled at using the mountainous terrain to their advantage, appearing suddenly to attack coalition forces before disappearing into hidden positions. They had also adapted their tactics specifically to counter Apache helicopters, using everything from small arms fire to sophisticated anti-aircraft weapons. Sarah's first combat mission came just 2 weeks after arriving in Afghanistan. Intelligence reports indicated that a convoy of coalition supply trucks was under attack in a remote valley, with casualties mounting and reinforcements unable to reach the scene due to enemy fire. 2 Apache helicopters, including Sarah's, were scrambled to provide close air support and help extract the wounded. As Sarah's Apache lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, her heart was pounding with anticipation and adrenaline. This was the moment she had trained for her entire career, the chance to use her skills to save American lives in actual combat. Her co-pilot and gunner, Chief Warrant Officer Martinez, was a veteran of multiple deployments who had volunteered to fly with Sarah despite some initial reservations about her inexperience in combat. The flight to the target area took 30 minutes, with Sarah navigating through mountain passes while staying low to avoid enemy detection. The radio chatter from ground controllers painted a grim picture of the situation. The convoy was pinned down by enemy fire from multiple positions, with several vehicles burning and casualties unable to be evacuated. As they approached the valley where the convoy was trapped, Sarah could see tracer rounds lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. The lead Apache, piloted by Captain Walsh, began engaging enemy positions on the ridgeline, while Sarah positioned her aircraft to attack targets on the opposite side of the valley. The coordination between the 2 helicopters was crucial to avoid friendly fire incidents. Sarah's first shots fired in combat were precise and devastating. Using the Apache's advanced targeting system, she identified enemy machine gun positions that were pinning down the convoy and engaged them with 30mm cannon fire. The high explosive rounds obliterated the enemy positions, immediately reducing the volume of fire directed at the trapped soldiers. Martinez was impressed by Sarah's calm professionalism under fire. "Beautiful shooting," he told her over the intercom as they maneuvered to engage additional targets. Enemy bullets were striking their aircraft, but Sarah maintained perfect control, adjusting her flight path to give Martinez the best possible firing positions while avoiding the heaviest concentrations of enemy fire. The battle lasted 45 minutes, with both Apache helicopters working together to systematically eliminate enemy positions and create a corridor for the convoy to escape. Sarah's aircraft fired over 200 rounds of 30mm ammunition and 4 Hellfire missiles, destroying multiple enemy positions and allowing the rescue operation to succeed. As they flew back to base, Martinez turned to look at Sarah with obvious respect. "That was some of the best combat flying I've ever seen," he told her. "You just saved a lot of American lives tonight." The successful mission marked Sarah's initiation into the brotherhood of combat pilots, earning her immediate credibility with everyone in the unit. Word of Sarah's outstanding performance spread quickly throughout the base. The ground soldiers she had helped rescue made sure everyone knew about the female Apache pilot who had saved their lives. Within days, Sarah found herself being approached by infantry soldiers who wanted to thank her personally for her actions. The respect she had earned through that first combat mission opened doors throughout the base. Officers who had previously been skeptical about women in combat aviation now sought her input on tactical planning. Her fellow Apache pilots began requesting her as their preferred wingman for particularly dangerous missions, recognizing her exceptional skills and cool demeanor under fire. As the deployment continued, Sarah's reputation grew with each successful mission. She participated in operations ranging from close air support for ground troops to direct action raids against high-value targets. Her accuracy with the Apache's weapon systems became legendary within the unit, with some pilots claiming she could thread a needle with a Hellfire missile. One mission in particular tested every aspect of Sarah's training and character. Intelligence had located a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The target was hiding in a compound deep in enemy territory, surrounded by civilians and heavily defended by experienced fighters. The mission required surgical precision to eliminate the target while minimizing civilian casualties. Sarah was selected to lead a 2-aircraft formation for the operation, a significant honor that reflected the confidence her commanders had in her abilities. The planning phase took weeks, with detailed analysis of the target compound and careful coordination with ground forces. On the night of the mission, Sarah's formation departed base at 0200 hours, flying through treacherous mountain terrain in complete darkness. The target compound was located in a valley surrounded by high peaks, making the approach extremely challenging. Enemy air defense systems had been detected in the area, adding another layer of danger to the operation. As they approached the target area, Sarah's advanced sensors detected movement around the compound that wasn't consistent with the intelligence briefing. Additional enemy fighters had reinforced the position, creating a much more dangerous situation than anticipated. Sarah had to make a split-second decision about whether to proceed with the mission or abort and return to base. Sarah chose to continue the mission, but she modified the attack plan to account for the changed circumstances. She directed her wingman to engage the outer defensive positions, while she focused on the primary target building. The coordination required was extremely complex, as both aircraft had to operate in the confined valley while avoiding civilian areas and friendly forces. Sarah's attack on the target building was a masterpiece of precision flying and weapons employment. She used a single Hellfire missile to eliminate the Taliban commander, while leaving adjacent buildings undamaged. The entire engagement lasted less than 3 minutes, after which both aircraft departed the area before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The mission was hailed as a complete success, with the high-value target eliminated and no civilian casualties reported. Sarah's leadership during the operation impressed even the most senior officers in the unit. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson recommended her for the Bronze Star Medal, citing her exceptional courage and skill under fire. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from a farm in Kansas to the cockpit of the world's most advanced attack helicopter. She had faced discrimination, skepticism, and institutional barriers, but her determination and skill had overcome every obstacle. More importantly, she had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to serving her country with distinction. The soldiers at Forward Operating Base Chapman organized a farewell ceremony for Sarah's unit as they prepared to return home. Representatives from every unit on the base attended, including many of the ground soldiers whose lives had been saved by Sarah's actions during her deployment. The commanding general of the base, Major General Robert Hayes, personally presented Sarah with the Bronze Star Medal. Captain Mitchell represents the very best of American military aviation, General Hayes said during the ceremony. Her courage, skill, and dedication have saved countless lives and advanced the cause of freedom in Afghanistan. She has proven beyond any doubt that women belong in combat aviation roles. As Sarah's aircraft lifted off from Chapman for the final time, she looked down at the base that had been her home for 9 months. She thought about the soldiers she had fought alongside, the missions they had accomplished together, and the bonds that had been forged in the crucible of combat. She also thought about the barriers she had broken and the path she had opened for other women who dreamed of serving in combat aviation. The return flight to the United States took 18 hours, with stops for fuel and crew rest. During the long journey, Sarah's fellow pilots talked about their experiences and the missions they had flown together. Captain Walsh, who had initially opposed her assignment to the unit, made a point of telling everyone within earshot that Sarah was the finest pilot he had ever flown with. When their transport aircraft finally touched down at Fort Hood, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and pride. She had successfully completed her first combat deployment, earning the respect of her peers and proving that women could excel in the most demanding military roles. But she also knew that her greatest challenges still lay ahead, as the military continued to evolve its policies regarding women in combat. The homecoming at Fort Hood was emotional for everyone involved. But for Sarah, it marked the beginning of an entirely new chapter in her career. Her exceptional performance in Afghanistan had not gone unnoticed by senior Army leadership, and within weeks of returning home, she received orders that would change everything. She was being transferred to the Pentagon to work with a special task force, developing new policies for women in combat roles. Major General Patricia Hayes, the same general who had championed Sarah's entry into Apache training, personally requested her assignment to the Pentagon. General Hayes recognized that having a proven combat veteran like Sarah involved in policy development would be crucial for creating effective and realistic guidelines for integrating women into previously restricted roles. Sarah's new position at the Pentagon was unlike anything she had experienced in her military career. Instead of spending her days flying helicopters and leading soldiers, she found herself in conference rooms with senior officers, defense officials, and congressional representatives. Her role was to provide real-world perspective on the challenges and opportunities of women serving in combat aviation roles. The work was important, but frustrating. Sarah quickly learned that military policy changes moved at a glacial pace, with every decision requiring extensive study, debate, and approval from multiple levels of leadership. She found herself explaining the same basic concepts repeatedly to officials who had never served in combat roles and struggled to understand the realities of modern warfare. During one particularly heated meeting with congressional staffers, Sarah was asked whether her presence in a combat unit had been disruptive to unit cohesion. "The only disruption," she replied calmly, "was having to repeatedly prove that I could do the same job as my male counterparts. Once I did that, we functioned as a team focused on completing our mission and bringing everyone home safely." Sarah's credibility was unquestioned due to her combat record, but she still faced skepticism from some quarters. Conservative members of Congress worried about the physical demands of combat roles, while some military officers expressed concerns about the long-term implications of policy changes. Sarah addressed each concern with facts, data, and personal experience, gradually building support for expanded opportunities for women. The breakthrough came during a briefing to the Secretary of Defense. Sarah presented a comprehensive analysis of her unit's performance in Afghanistan, demonstrating that the presence of female pilots had actually enhanced rather than diminished combat effectiveness. Her statistical analysis showed improved mission success rates and reduced casualty rates when women were included in mixed-gender aviation units. "The data speaks for itself," Sarah told the Secretary. "Gender diversity in combat aviation brings different perspectives, skills, and approaches that make units more effective. The enemy doesn't care whether the pilot shooting at them is male or female. They only care about the accuracy and effectiveness of the engagement." The Secretary was impressed by Sarah's presentation and authorized an expanded pilot program that would allow qualified women to serve in all combat aviation roles. Sarah was tasked with developing the implementation plan and training protocols that would ensure the program's success. It was the opportunity she had been working toward her entire career. As news of the policy change spread throughout the military, Sarah found herself in the spotlight. Media outlets requested interviews, military publications wanted feature stories, and advocacy groups sought her endorsement. Sarah was careful to maintain her focus on professional competence rather than gender politics, emphasizing that opportunities should be based on qualifications rather than demographics. The phone call that would define the next phase of Sarah's career came on a Tuesday morning in October. Lieutenant General Mark Richardson, the commanding general of the Army's Aviation Center, wanted to meet with her personally. General Richardson was known throughout the Army as a demanding leader who expected excellence from everyone under his command. "Captain Mitchell," General Richardson said during their meeting, "I've been following your career closely and I have a proposal for you. We're establishing a new test unit to evaluate advanced Apache technologies and tactics. I want you to command this unit and help shape the future of attack aviation. Are you interested?" Sarah was stunned by the offer. Command of a test unit was typically reserved for lieutenant colonels with extensive experience and proven leadership records. At 29 years old, she would be one of the youngest officers ever selected for such a position. More importantly, the unit would be responsible for developing the tactics and procedures that would be used by Apache pilots for years to come. The new assignment took Sarah to Fort Rucker, where she would work with the most advanced Apache helicopters ever built. The aircraft featured cutting-edge sensors, improved weapon systems, and enhanced defensive capabilities. Sarah's job was to test these systems in realistic scenarios and develop the training programs that would teach other pilots how to employ them effectively. Sarah's test unit consisted of 12 pilots, including several women who had followed the path she had pioneered. Leading this diverse group of exceptional aviators was both challenging and rewarding. Each pilot brought unique skills and perspectives, creating a dynamic environment that fostered innovation and excellence. The testing program pushed both the aircraft and pilots to their limits. Sarah led missions that explored the Apache's capabilities in extreme weather conditions, high-altitude environments, and complex urban terrain. The data collected during these tests would influence Apache development and employment for decades to come. During one particularly challenging test mission, Sarah's aircraft experienced a catastrophic engine failure while operating at maximum weight and altitude. The emergency occurred during a simulated combat scenario, adding complexity and stress to an already dangerous situation. Sarah's response was immediate and decisive, demonstrating the exceptional piloting skills that had made her reputation. She managed to auto-rotate the disabled aircraft to a safe landing in a small clearing, avoiding injury to her crew and preventing the loss of a multi-million-dollar helicopter. The emergency landing was captured on video by observers, and the footage became a training tool used throughout the Army to demonstrate proper emergency procedures. General Richardson witnessed the emergency landing and its aftermath. He watched as Sarah calmly supervised the recovery operation, ensuring her crew's safety while coordinating with maintenance teams to assess the aircraft damage. Her professionalism and leadership during the crisis impressed everyone present. That, General Richardson told his staff after the incident, is why Captain Mitchell is the best pilot I've ever seen. She doesn't just fly the aircraft, she commands it, and she leads people through any situation. His assessment would later become part of Sarah's official evaluation, helping to cement her reputation as an exceptional officer. As Sarah's command tour neared its end, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from a skeptical recruit to one of the Army's most respected pilots. She had broken barriers, changed policies, and proven that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle. More importantly, she had opened doors for countless other women who shared her dreams of serving in combat aviation. The awards ceremony, recognizing Sarah's achievements, was attended by senior officials from throughout the Department of Defense. She received the Legion of Merit, one of the highest peacetime awards for exceptional service, along with recognition as the Army's Aviation Officer of the Year. But the moment that meant the most to her came when a young female lieutenant approached after the ceremony. "Ma'am," the lieutenant said, "I just wanted to thank you. Because of what you've accomplished, I'm starting Apache training next month. You made it possible for people like me to follow our dreams." Sarah smiled, understanding that her greatest achievement wasn't the medals or recognition she had received, but the opportunities she had created for others. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, promotion to major and command of an Apache battalion, she thought about her father's words from years earlier. He had told her that military aviators were heroes who saved lives and served their country with distinction. Through her own journey, Sarah had learned that being a hero wasn't about gender, politics, or breaking barriers. It was about excellence, service, and the willingness to put others before yourself. The little girl from Kansas who had dreamed of flying while lying in wheat fields had achieved everything she had ever imagined, and more. But Sarah Mitchell knew that her story was just beginning, and that the most important chapters were still to be written in the skies above future battlefields, where her skills and leadership would continue to make a difference in the lives of American soldiers.